Hello and welcome to LFC Focus. It is pre-match build-up showtime with Liverpool back in Premier League action this weekend, looking to put that disappointing draw at Old Trafford behind us and get back to winning ways. Obviously, up to that point, it was a perfect start for Liverpool in the Premier League. We won every single game we had played, and I think in some ways, maybe a weight has been taken off us slightly, because obviously there was all this talk about the record Man City had set a couple seasons ago of 17 wins in a row, and the fact that Liverpool were one away from equalling that record, and that was a whole narrative going into Old Trafford. And had we won that game, then you imagine even more would have been made of it this weekend. Obviously the chance to set a record of the most consecutive league wins, I'm pretty sure in English football history, then that would have obviously added an extra narrative that the players just don't really need at the moment. Obviously at the moment it is quite simply about winning every single game, and that's what was the most disappointing thing about the result at Old Trafford. You know, the one image that sticks in my mind from that game is not the Lallana goal, not all the VAR stuff, it's Sadio Mane trying to yank everyone away from the celebrations, because he knows that a draw is not good enough in any game, because Man City, while they haven't been at their relentless best so far this season, are still hot on Liverpool's heels. You know, they won today, and the whole thing that's being made of it now is that they're only 3 points behind Liverpool, and we had all this stuff this season where we said, oh yeah, well, we've got a game in hand and stuff like that, but you never know what's going to happen in your game in hand. Liverpool could feasibly draw tomorrow, and suddenly the gap's, 4 points, and everyone's talking about the title race being blown wide open, even though it's only, October? That's just the mad nature of the race that Liverpool are in. So it is so important to just get back to winning ways, and I think without the pressure of some huge eternal record on our shoulders, it should be ever so slightly easier for the players. And I think obviously, like I said, it is just about winning every single game, and if we can just put that Old Trafford result behind us. The problem we had last season was we started to rack up draws. We had one little draw where we weren't quite at our best, and it continued happening around that January, February, March period, and that's where we fell away, lost our lead, and eventually allowed Manchester City to win the league despite our best efforts in the last couple of months. So I think it's so important that we do what City were capable of doing last season, which is when you get knocked down, getting straight back up again and just carrying on like nothing's happening, because not only does that help you, but it's so disheartening for your opponents in the title race if they know that every time you drop some points, you're just going to go on yet another absolutely fantastic run. And obviously the opponent this weekend is Tottenham Hotspur. It is at Anfield. It's a Super Sunday 4:30 kickoff, the centrepiece of the weekend, and it's an interesting game really, because Spurs Liverpool at Anfield over the last couple of seasons at least has certainly seemed to follow a rather predictable formula. Normally what happens, first half, the Liverpool dominate, they get at least one goal, they're normally in front by half time, but everyone's saying they should have killed that game off. It should be 3-0, 4-0, you know, the intense pressing, the way we just nick the ball back, counter-attack, create so many chances. Liverpool should be out of sight by half time, and then half time comes, Pochettino, you know, he's a great tactician, he tweaks things, he moves formations around, doesn't necessarily make substitutions, just changes who's playing where and what everyone's roles are, and suddenly Spurs are a different team. They come out for the second half, they work their way into it, they gradually get more and more confident, build up more and more momentum, they get an equaliser, and then the last 15 minutes is just bonkers. Last season it went our way, we got that insane 89th minute winner. The season before it ended up being a draw, both teams scored in stoppage time, and it was just ridiculous. I think what we need to make sure we do this season is follow some parts of that blueprint. You know, a late winner would be lovely, and obviously that first half where we blow Tottenham away, let's keep that in there. But I think what's really important is that Liverpool control the game here. That's one of the things that didn't happen at any point at Old Trafford, and it's something that we are so good at normally, is being in charge, dictating the tempo, dictating the play, dictating, you know, who's in the ascendancy when, sometimes letting the opposition come onto you a little bit just to create a little bit of space and alter the dynamic of the game. But at any given point, it feels like Liverpool are in charge, and as a result, you feel like they're always the ones that are going to come away with the result. It didn't feel like that at Old Trafford. It felt, you know, mad and out of control, and like Jurgen Klopp was just Hail Marying substitutes onto the pitch in the vague hope that they influence the match in some positive way. And I think what we need to make sure we do is avoid all of that this weekend and make sure that throughout the game against Spurs, we are the ones in charge, because, and I'll come on to them a little bit later, but as we know, they're not doing that well this season. Their form has been very patchy, and I feel like if you keep them down, if you subdue them, if you don't give them any hope, then they're not going to be a walkover by any means, but you should hopefully come away with a reasonably convincing win. So team news going into the game, there are going to be a few changes to the starting 11. Obviously, Trent Alexander-Arnold missed out in the game against Genk. Genk in midweek due to illness. Jurgen Klopp has pretty much confirmed in his press conference on Friday that Trent will be coming back into the side for this match. I think Milner deputised reasonably well, as did Joe Gomez when he came on towards the end of the game against Genk. But Trent is obviously the first choice right back, and it's quite nice that he's had sort of a rest. Obviously, if he's been ill, he hasn't been training and everything, and he might have slightly lost a little bit fitness, but at least he's had some sort of break, because one thing that I think is going to start to concern Jurgen Klopp a little bit more is the fitness of the fullbacks and just how many games they can play. Andrew Robertson obviously came off with about half an hour to go against Genk. Klopp said in his press conference on Friday that that wasn't anything to do with injury. That was simply, you know, maybe a tactical substitution or a fitness substitution or something like that. Mainly, I think it was just to give Andrew Robertson a little bit of a rest, because he is obviously just playing relentless football at the moment. So hopefully he'll be starting at the weekend as well. But Trent is almost definitely going to be back in the side. Joel Matip is a bit more of a doubt. Klopp said in his press conference he doesn't really know 100% whether or not Joel Matip's going to be available. I think typically in these kind of situations he tends to err on the side of caution. We've seen what's happening at Man City at the moment with their defensive injury crisis, where I think one of the main problems they have is because they're missing a few key players, they're rushing other players back far too quickly, and as a result just incurring more and more injuries, and it's just creating this vicious cycle that never stops. And I think Liverpool are keen to avoid that, which is why, you know, when Joel Matip missed out in the Champions League game against not Red Star Belgrade, that was last season, when he missed out in the game against Salzburg at Anfield, he also missed out in the weekend game against Leicester, despite the fact there were suggestions he might have actually been fit to play that game. And I think we follow a similar template in this game. We've also seen from David Lynch of the Evening Standard that Dejan Lovren is likely to deputise once again in this game. Apparently he's impressed Jurgen Klopp. I mean, you can have your own opinions of how Dejan Lovren has performed so far this season. I thought did well against Leicester, did okay against Genk with a couple of, you know, Dejan Lovren moments. But I think he's been all right, and it generally comes down to whether or not he gets put under any individual pressure or not. But by the sounds of it, Jurgen Klopp is keen and willing to rely on him again. Apart from that, I do think we're going to see some more rotation in the midfield. We saw a very, very new look midfield in the game against Genk, and a lot of people were happy to see it. Jurgen Klopp was very interesting with his post-match comments after the game. He kind of said, you know, there were lots of fantastic things that he saw. He's pleased with the goals from Oxlade-Chamberlain. He's pleased with some of the output from Naby Keita, but there's still plenty of work to be done. The defensive side of the game, obviously, as we all saw on Wednesday night, needs a little bit of work, because Fabinho was horrendously exposed at times, and I don't think we can get away with that this weekend. And also, Klopp spoke about how, you know, that midfield wasn't just a tactical decision. It was also to do with the fact that Henderson and Gini Wijnaldum do need rests going into this difficult run of fixtures that we've got coming up. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw some rotation in the midfield as well as the defence. So then, as for how I think we're actually going to line up, I reckon, of course, the holy goalie, Alisson Becker, is of course going to be the man between the sticks. There's no argument there. The centre-back pairing, of course, Virgil van Dijk will be starting for Liverpool as usual. I reckon, of course, with the David Lynch piece in the Standard today, it's highly likely that Dejan Lovren will be the man to partner him. There will be shouts for Joe Gomez as well, and you do kind of wonder exactly what his position is at Liverpool at the moment. Maybe he's not playing at centre-back because Klopp wants him on standby in case we need to, you know, rest Andrew Robertson or Trent Alexander-Arnold or anything like that. But I do think Gomez needs football. He's a young player. He's got absolutely huge potential. He's obviously going to be a key player going forward for Liverpool. We've seen just how good he can be, especially alongside Virgil van Dijk in that partnership at the start of last season. But his form has slightly dipped since then. So far this season, he has never quite reached those heights. So Jurgen Klopp is well within his rights to take Joe Gomez out the side. But I do kind of think, well, Lovren, we're going to be shifting him on at the end of the season. There's obviously nothing to do with development there. The only reason you can really think of playing him is either out of necessity or to bump up his price tag slightly when we do move him along. So really, ideally, I'd like to see Joe Gomez, but by the sounds of it, it is actually going to be Dejan Lovren partnering Virgil van Dijk. In the fullback positions, I think Andrew Robertson definitely plays, gets that half an hour's rest against Genk, so hopefully he'll be somewhere near raring to go for this game. We are absolutely running him into the ground at the moment, so of course he'll almost definitely get some sort of respite in the League Cup game against Arsenal in midweek, but for now, he'll probably be starting, and Trent Alexander-Arnold, as Jurgen Klopp said, will almost definitely be coming back into the side in right back. And then we move on to the midfield, and that is where things get a little bit interesting. The one that I really am intrigued by is Fabinho, because obviously if Jurgen Klopp is giving rest to Henderson and Gini Wijnaldum in midweek, then clearly he must think that that entire midfield, essentially the midfield he's used in every single big game so far this season, particularly in the Premier League, is all in need of some sort of rest. Unless Fabinho is playing on a different level, unless his fitness is slightly improved. He had a better summer, I think, without any involvement in the Nations League or anything like that. And of course, he didn't go away to the Copa America with the Brazil squad for some bizarre reason. So maybe Klopp thinks that he's got a little bit more in his legs and he will almost definitely get a rest against Arsenal or not. Remains to be seen. Obviously, Fabinho also on 4 yellow cards, so we've got to be slightly careful there. If he picks up another one in the game against Aston Villa next weekend, then he will, of course, be suspended for the game against City, which would be a nightmare. So maybe Klopp's interested in him picking up a yellow card in this game so that he misses out in just the Arsenal game in midweek in the League Cup. So that remains to be seen. I reckon he definitely starts this game because he is almost irreplaceable and he does get a rest in midweek. But it's certainly interesting to see how Jurgen Klopp perceives the relative levels of fitness in his midfield, if he's willing and able to give Henderson and Gini Wijnaldum a rest, but insists on starting Fabinho in that number 6 role in every single game, or at least every single game outside of those Carabao Cup matches. So I think Fabinho keeps his place a little bit further ahead. It is very, very interesting indeed, because obviously Ox and KEITA both impressed so much against Genk. It was very much, flawed masterpiece performances. They showed so much potential, but there were issues going backwards. I think KEITA maybe was a little bit more defensively sound than Oxlade-Chamberlain, who was essentially given the freedom to just run forward, join the attack, get wide, get up into the final third and stuff like that, and of course score some wonderful goals that help Liverpool out. So I'm not entirely sure how Jurgen Klopp plays this one. I think Gini Wijnaldum definitely comes back into the side. These are the kind of games that he's made for, and he did put in a very, very impressive cameo in the last half hour against Genk, including essentially starting the move that sets up that third goal for Sadio Mane. So I think Gini Wijnaldum definitely comes back into the side. The other spot, if truth be told, I've got no idea. I think he's probably going to go with Jordan Henderson. I think he plays it safe. Obviously, like I said, KEITA and Ox, so impressive in their games against Genk. But I just think Jurgen Klopp will be a little bit more concerned about the defensive side of things. And if there's one thing that showed but also didn't show at Old Trafford, it's just how important substitutions can be. Adam Lallana obviously comes on and gets the goal. KEITA comes on and changes the game. But if we're being honest, we would have much preferred to see Mohamed Salah or Xherdan Shaqiri or some kind of attacking substitution coming off. And I think having both KEITA and Oxlade-Chamberlain available from the bench with that excellent front three, and probably with Divock Origi on the bench as well, I think that's what Jurgen Klopp will be hoping to have in his arsenal, because as I said, these games have the tendency to go mental for the last 15 minutes, and Klopp will want players that he can throw into the fray in those kind of situations, that can take advantage, that have got that extra yard of pace, that have got a bit more energy to keep the team going, because as bad as Spurs have been at the moment, they've still got a good performance in them, as I'll mention later on. So we just don't know what kind of Tottenham's going to show up. So I think Ox and KEITA probably get relegated to the bench, but I would not be at all surprised if they do play some sort of role at some point in this game. But I think we start with Fabinho at the base, and then Henderson and Gini Wijnaldum ahead of him. And then the front three, I never really talk about them in this section, because by and large, unless there's an injury or unless one of them is just performing so badly and hasn't scored a goal in 10 games, which very, very rarely happens, they're always going to start, and that is, of course, Roberto Firmino down the middle, Mohamed Salah down the right, and Sadio Mane down the left-hand side. So taking a little look at Spurs then, obviously they haven't really got too many injury problems at the moment. Mauricio Pochettino did his press conference, and I think he said that Hugo Lloris was the only major absentee from the squad. Obviously Gazaniga has been deputising for the last few matches, and I think it will be interesting to see exactly how we try and capitalise on that, because we have seen in the past in these games against Spurs that Liverpool do have a little bit of a routine they do from corners. We tend to send the ball very, very close to the goalkeeper. It worked in the game at Wembley last season where Gini Wijnaldum scores that header that just about gets over the line to open the scoring. That was one of those situations where the corner was targeted straight at the goalkeeper. With it being Spurs' backup goalkeeper as well, we'll probably try and unnerve him. So that's definitely something that Liverpool can look to do. But aside from that, looking at Spurs as a team as a whole, they haven't really been great so far this season. And I think it's interesting to look at their performance against Red Star Belgrade in midweek, because they did win that game 5-0. And I think one thing that really stood out for me was just the effort from the team, the desire. They looked like they really wanted to win that game, and they wanted to throw everything on the line. And this whole kind of desire and teams wanting it argument is thrown out around a little bit too much at the moment. It's something that gets hurled at Arsenal players pretty much every time they lose. Gary Neville on Monday Night Football loves the argument that the Arsenal players just aren't playing for the shirt and stuff like that. And I don't think that's necessarily what is even the case at Spurs. I don't think it's that they don't care. I think it's just that they can't keep going like this anymore. There's this whole argument going around now that they just basically have Pochettino fatigue. The guy's been there for 5 years. He's a very, very intense manager. He is very much my way or the highway. And some players, it's not that they don't care. It's not that they don't want to win the matches. It's not that they don't want to put the effort in. They just simply haven't got the mental strength to keep carrying on. And it looked like maybe a corner had been turned in that game against Red Star. They looked like the old Spurs. It was free-flowing, plenty of players getting forward. Whenever they attacked, there was always someone on the other flank. There was always someone coming in near post, someone in the middle and stuff like that. But if we're being perfectly honest, and as Liverpool fans, we've seen Red Star Belgrade play away in Europe against a big English side, and they're not that great. And they weren't that great against Spurs either on Wednesday night. They left far too much space open, and I back us to defend so much better than they did. So I don't think there's any chance of Liverpool losing this game 5-0, although obviously, you know, touch wood and all that. We don't want that happening. But I do think Spurs maybe will be buoyed slightly going into this game. They will want to obviously put a marker down in the Premier League as well. All the talk coming out the Red Star game, I think it was Harry Kane who said that essentially counts for nothing unless they can turn their Premier League form around as well. So you can almost regard that Red Star game as immaterial. Some people say, oh no, Spurs coming back into form right as soon as they play us. But I think even if they weren't in form, the chance to sort of get a result at Anfield would have been so big in terms of them trying to turn their season around. They will have come into this game thinking, well, if we can just come away even just with a point, it shows that we're moving in the right direction. So regardless of what happened in midweek, Spurs will be raring to go in this game as much as they have been at any other point this season. And that is what I mean about managing the game and about keeping Spurs on the back foot and making sure at no point do they feel like they've got any chance. And that doesn't mean battering them 5-0. It doesn't mean dominating the ball. It means essentially what we did in the Champions League final the last time we played them, where it didn't matter whether Spurs were getting, 10 shots on target in the space of the last 15 minutes or anything like that. It never looked like they were going to get a goal. It never looked like they were going to get back in the game because Liverpool were always in control, whether they had the ball or whether they didn't. The positioning was fantastic. The desire, the intelligence to win the ball back in the right places, to know when to press, to know when to stand off, to know when to close players down and move them out of dangerous areas, and to know when to simply let them shoot because they have no chance in hell of getting past their absolutely fantastic goalkeeper. If you do all of those things fantastically, then you are in control of the match, and Spurs will have not a hope in hell of coming away with anything other than their tails between their legs at Anfield this weekend. So if you ask for my opinion, I think we're going to win. Scoreline wise, I don't think we're going to batter them. I think it could be very close. But I think what's most likely is that we actually come away with something like a simple 2-0 win where Liverpool are in charge most of the way through the game, if performing slightly unspectacularly. So yeah, that is all for today's video. Thank you guys very much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, as always, you know what to do. Hit the like button down there. Hit that subscribe button there if you're around here. Check out some of the other videos that have been out on the channel over the past few days. Don't forget to follow at LSUFocusTV on Twitter. And I'll be back tomorrow evening after we've hopefully beaten Spurs to maintain our lead at the top of the Premier League. Until then, bye for now.